Those who live in death should be left well alone.
Okay, so this may seem counterintuitive as a mage, but if you want to stat optimize early game and late game, you want to start off as a vagabond. For a keepsake, grab the stone sword key unless you're confident you're not going to miss any of the ones shown in the guide, then you could grab the golden seed, it's up to you. Now as usual, when heading to Limgrave, just run up the left side of the tree sentinel, avoid him, and head into the Church of Ella. Be sure to grab the golden rune 2 out front before heading in and activating the Site of Grace. Speak with the merchant Kale and sell that golden rune 2 that we just picked up for 400 runes. And we're going to use some of those runes to buy a torch. This will help you navigate dark areas like caves, but it's also mandatory for something we're going to be doing later on. Next, just follow the path up and rest at the gate front Site of Grace. This will trigger the cutscene that will get you access to torrents so you can finally move around a little bit faster. Don't forget to map your spectral steed whistle before moving on. Grab the map fragment at gate front and then jump down the cellar stairs nearby. Open the chest down there and grab the whetstone knife. This will allow you to put ashes of war on your weapons. Now open your map and fast travel back to the Church of Ella where you'll find Rena. Go through the dialogue until you get the Spirit Calling Bell and the Lone Wolf Ashes. You can use these during boss fights if you're new to the game. Then head to this cliff, which is just southwest of the first step Site of Grace where you started out. Because there's a Spirit Spring here, you can actually jump down here without taking any fall damage. And you're going to come over here and pick up this Gold Pickle Foulfoot. When you use this, it increases the runes you get by 30% for 3 minutes. We're actually going to save this for later. Then we're going to go back to the gate front Site of Grace and we're going to ride southeast to the bridge where we're going to kill this scarab. Using this Ash of War will increase the damage of your next hit by 60%. We're going to put it on the halberd at the very next Site of Grace that we can find, and this will give us all the damage we need early on. Now head southeast and grab the Limgrave East map fragment, and then make your way even further east over to Fort Height. Be sure to rest at the Site of Grace just in case you die. Grab the golden seed out front and then just run past everything inside of the fort and climb the ladder to the top. If you aggro the knight and you don't want to fight him, just quit out at the top of the ladder and then spawn back in. You can also summon your wolves up here to help you in this fight, or you can just use determination and R2s to stance break in. It's not a very hard fight and you have several options here. Now for the reason that we came here, there's a chest with the left half of the Dectus medallion in it. We need both halves of this medallion in order to go up to Altus Plateau later. Now follow the road north from Fort Height until you get to the Third Church of America. Don't forget to pick up the Sacred Tear to reinforce your flasks. And even more importantly, don't forget to pick up the Flask of Wondrous Physic. We'll be picking up 2 tiers later on to put in here to boost our damage significantly. As with any mage build, I recommend having at least 2 or 3 mana flasks available at all times. Next, we're going to head to the small pond just behind the church and use the Waygate. This is going to save us a ton of time and take us to the very northeast side of Caelid. When you spawn in, you're just going to turn around and ride south and grab any Sites of Grace on your way. I would definitely grab the Site of Grace before running underneath the dragon on the bridge just in case. If you don't, that'll be the one time something crazy happens. After crossing the bridge, you want to make a left towards Lem's Rise and you'll see a graveyard. Be sure to loot all the runes there before using the Spirit Spring to jump down safely. Grab the Site of Grace because there's actually a farm spot here I'm going to show in a minute. Use the Spirit Spring to double jump up on top of Lem's Rise. Then go up the stairs and open the chest for a memory stone. This will increase the maximum number of spells you can have equipped by 1. Now if you're new to the game and you want to put a couple stat points in early, you can ride just down the hill from the Site of Grace here and make this ball fall off the ledge. And it'll give you almost 2,000 runes each time you do it, so you can do that to get some early levels if you wanted to. From here we're going to use that Spirit Spring to jump back up to the graveyard and then just keep heading west. Then there's another Spirit Spring behind the Minor Erd tree. We're going to jump up there and we're going to rest at the Site of Grace for Fort Ferrith. And resting at the Site of Grace is actually going to trigger another cutscene, at which point you'll be given the option to go to the Round Table Hold. And once you do this once, you can travel there via your map at any point that you want to in the future. So after gaining access to the Round Table, just fast travel back to Fort Ferrith. Now we need something from the top of this fort, but these enemies are actually a little bit tougher. So what we're going to do is just run past everything and go straight up the ladder. You might get poisoned, you might not. It really doesn't matter if you do. Once you get to the top, just open the chest and grab the right half of the Dectus medallion. And then you can just fast travel back to the Site of Grace to get out of here. And then from the Fort Ferrith Site of Grace, we're actually going to head west and grab the Dragon Barrow map fragment. And then we're going to head even slightly further west to grab the Dragon Barrow West Site of Grace. I'm going to show it on the map so that you can orient it to this little tower just to the northeast that we're going to head to. Now when you start to approach this tower, you're going to see a scarab out front that we want to approach from the right side. And we do this so that when we hit it and aggro it, it heads towards the cliff. And if you just keep following it that direction and nudging it, eventually you'll get it all the way to the cliff where you can hit it off. And this just makes it easier and faster since our damage isn't that high yet. But this rewards us with a Somber Smithing Stone 8. And we can actually grab a Somber Smithing Stone 9 just a couple feet away. We just want to get down below where we're currently standing, so we're just going to make our way down this hill and back around. Once we loop back, we're going to make our way to the actual base of the tower. And on the ground in the middle of all these chairs, there's going to be a Somber Smithing Stone 9. So now all we need is 1 through 7. Go back to Fort Ferrith and head south to the Church of the Plague. Be sure not to miss the Sacred Tier here, and it's very important that you grab this Site of Grace while you're here. Now jump down and follow the road south, picking up loot along the way to the Southern Aeonia Swamp Bank Site of Grace. And then just south of that Site of Grace on the road is going to be the Caelid map fragment. Then we're going to actually head to the northwestern side of the swamp, to an area called the Street of Sage's Ruins. Now use your determination in combination with a charged attack to make short work of these enemies, and pick up the meteorite staff right behind them. This is the best early game staff in Elden Ring. It can't be upgraded, so it will get outshined by other staffs later on, but it has the best sorcery scaling early on while you have no intelligence invested. Don't forget to grab the Golden Rune 4 on your way back out. Then you're going to head just east to the building with the stairs down to a cellar. Just run past all the enemies and straight into the cellar, open the chest, and you're going to find Rock Sling. This is a great early game spell that does a lot of poise damage, and now I show you how to get the Death's Poker without even fighting the boss. Time to grab the Death's Poker, the centerpiece of our build. After heading back to the Southern Aeonia Swamp Bank Site of Grace, you need to wait until nightfall. And when you get up from the Site of Grace and look directly east, you're actually going to see the Deathrite Bird behind you. So you're going to mount Torrent, you're going to ride over just close enough to aggro him, and then start baiting him towards the cliff. At first you want to bait him towards this smaller route that I go to, and then once you have him near the cliffs, you just want to bait him along the cliffs towards the larger tree route. Once you bait him along the cliff to the larger tree route, you're just going to jump to the other side, and then you're just going to jump off of Torrent and stand directly underneath the tree root. And then it's just as simple as standing here until he jumps off the cliff and dies on his own. You don't even need to swing your weapon during this entire fight. And if his AI is being weird or you mess something up, just go back to the Site of Grace, wait till nightfall, and try it again. And with this simple trick done, you get 15,000 runes, and more importantly, you get the Death's Poker. This is one of the strongest weapons in Elden Ring, and now you have it before even fighting your first boss. And we're not even close to done yet. I'm going to get you to level 60 plus with 40 plus intelligence, and we're going to upgrade this weapon almost to max level. So head back to the Church of the Plague and jump down the cliffs to the southwest. Just take your time and be careful, because if you jump down too far, you will die from fall damage. Head into Gowry's shack and he'll ask you to find a certain needle. First, we're going to stop next door in Celia, the town of sorcery, and we're going to jump to the rooftops and light all 3 of the braziers to break the seals around town. Once you get to the rooftops for the first seal, it's really easy to get to the other 2. Be sure to grab the stone sword key on the roof before jumping down after lighting the 3rd one. Now if there's any enemies in your way, just use determination and a jumping R2. But you're looking for this intersection in the very middle of the town, and the seal that was there will be gone now. And you'll gain access to this chest, which contains a sorcery called Night Comet. Especially early game, this is a very strong general use sorcery, so feel free to use it with your meteorite staff to give you some range while exploring. From the Southern Aeonia Swamp Bank Site of Grace, we're going to head into the swamp and grab this Somber Smithing Stone 4. And now I'm going to show you how to defeat another really difficult boss without ever swinging your weapon. So while you're mounted, just ride in and start the Commander O'Neill boss fight. Then run to the front of the arena and kind of hang out in this corner while you bait him out. This spot will shield you from the arrows that his summons shoot. Then just slowly keep baiting him out of the arena towards the Site of Grace. And you'll see a couple of swamp geysers popping up over here. They're going to pop up in the same place every time, so basically you just want to bait him into them. The initial blast does almost 800 damage, and if he's hit by all the smaller ticks as well, he should be taking over 1200 damage every time you lure him into it. Basically all you need to do is stay mounted and ride in circles around him. It really trivializes one of the harder fights in the game. Now if he happens to summon out here, you can just bait them in as well, and it typically only takes 1 hit for them. You shouldn't have any problem with this fight, especially since he walks so slow. Once he's dead, he'll drop a weapon called the Commander's Standard. This weapon has a skill on it called Rallying Standard, and this skill is the best aura buff in Elden Ring. It increases all of your damage by 20% for 30 seconds. You'll also get the Unalloyed Gold Needle to progress Gowry's questline. All you need to do is go back to Gowry's shack. He'll ask you for time with the needle, just save and exit, load back in, and then go to the Church of the Plague where Millicent was. Give her the Unalloyed Gold Needle and then rest at the Site of Grace to reload the area. She's going to give you a reward, but more importantly, she's going to progress Gowry's questline so you can go back to him now and purchase spells. I highly recommend that you buy Night Maiden's Mist. This is a great AoE damage over time spell that's really good for cheesing bosses that you have trouble with. Now we're going back to Gatefront and heading up to the Stormhill Shack and grabbing the Stone Sword key outside. We're going to take the hidden path around the east side of Stormville Castle to skip it for now, and we're going to grab the Sacred Tear in the Church of Irith. Then we're going to head north and grab the map for Liurnia East. And in the ruins just northwest of there, there's a waygate that's going to take us to the South Rye Lucaria Gate. Now when you get there, be sure that you don't forget to interact with the Site of Grace because we're going to be coming back here later. Now you can use this little trick to jump down a lot faster from this Site of Grace. Now from here, head southeast to this point on the map to pick up the map fragment for Liurnia North. And from the map fragment, head north until you see a small gazebo with a waygate inside. This waygate is going to save you a ton of time by transporting you all the way up to Liurnia West. You're going to spawn in directly on the map fragment for Liurnia West. Be sure to grab the road to the Manor Site of Grace right next to EG. And then speak with EG and he will sell you Somber Smithing Stones 1, 2, 3, and 4. You should have plenty of runes right now, just purchase whichever smithing stones you're missing. For me, that was 2 and 3. Now while we still have some extra runes, we're going to upgrade our Death's Poker all the way to +4. And even at +4, this weapon's incredibly strong. But we're going to level it up a lot more here in a second. Now from the Site of Grace, just loop down along the cliffs until you get to a low enough point that you can jump without taking too much fall damage. Then you're going to snatch and run with the Intelligence Knock Crystal tier. This extra 10 intelligence will give us even more early game damage with weapon and spell scaling. Now we're going to spend the rest of our runes to get 15 strength, 17 dexterity, and 11 intelligence. And these are the base stats needed to equip our Death's Poker, so we're going to be using that from here on out. Keep following the road to the Manor north and then eventually east until you can jump across to the Bellum Church. Grab the Bellum Church Site of Grace as a checkpoint, and then be sure that you don't forget to pick up the Sacred Tear in the backside of the church as well. Keep following the Bellum Highway north while dodging any incoming threats. Grab the Site of Grace for the Grand Lift to Dectus because we're going to be coming back here later on. Now move forward and present the completed Dectus medallion to use the Grand Lift to Dectus and reach the Altus Plateau. Grab the Altus Plateau map fragment as well as the Lindale Royal Capital map fragment. At this point, you're going to head to the Bower of Bounty Site of Grace. This is in the center of the north part of the Altus Plateau. You should see 3 Wormface enemies walking around a scarab. We might as well go ahead and throw in our Intelligence Knot tier and start using that. These enemies are really dangerous with Death Blight, so all we're going to do is ride by and hit the scarab to scare it the other direction. We're going to bait the Wormfaces towards us and then ride past them back the other direction and finish off the scarab. This allows you to get the Somber Smithing Stone 5 without having to actually fight anything. So now all we need is a Somber Smithing Stone 6 and 7. If you follow the road along the north side of Altus Plateau west, it'll lead you to Mount Gelmir via this bridge. Then you're going to climb this ladder next to the bridge to get to the first Mount Gelmir campsite Site of Grace. And as usual, anytime we see a graveyard, we're going to loot all the runes. When you're finished looting, kill the wolf next to the chair on the opposite end of the graveyard. And then loot the body in the chair for a Somber Smithing Stone 6. Now we're heading back to Limgrave and heading south to the Weeping Peninsula via the bridge. And we're going to grab the Stone Sword key on the way. To get a fast travel point, we're going to grab the Castlemorn Rampart Site of Grace on our way to getting the Weeping Peninsula map fragment. Then you have to loop all the way around to the southwest part of the Weeping Peninsula to the 4th Church of Marika. Be sure to grab both the Site of Grace and the Sacred Tear before heading out of the church and heading southeast. And just keep heading southeast up the hill towards the Tower of Return, just dodging the enemies at the base of the tower. Climb to the top of the tower and dispatch the lone enemy at the top. And then open up the chest, which is actually a transporter trap that's going to take you to the Royal Capital. Now you're going to spawn in this closed off part of the Royal Capital and you won't have access to the rest of it. But we can do what's called a wrong warp and it works on PC and console. Just rest at the Site of Grace, then open your map and travel to the Table of Lost Grace. The trick here is once you click travel, you need to force quit Elden Ring the second that the loading bar on the bottom hits 100%. Now if you timed it correctly, you're going to show up at the first area of the Royal Capital. Before you do anything else, you need to go inside the room to your right and hit the Site of Grace. Otherwise, if you die, you won't spawn back here. Now you don't have to fight a single enemy here, you're just going to run past everything on the path that I'm showing now. Jumping down to the rooftop seems to be the fastest and safest way to get through here. The goal here is to reach and activate the Avenue Balcony Site of Grace. Once you reach the Site of Grace, you're going to head down the stairs, jump over the railing on the left, jump off the rooftops down into this well, then you're going to follow my path to the next Site of Grace. The only enemies along this path are going to be a couple of rats, but if you're quick, they shouldn't bother you. Since you can't take damage while you're in the animation of opening a door, all you need to worry about is rolling forward as soon as you finish the door opening animation. From here, just jump down the ladder and rest at the underground roadside Site of Grace. This gives you a very close checkpoint should you die during this next part. Just head out the door, go left, and then jump down the ladder on your right. Run past the enemies up this pipe and jump down where it levels off. Wait for the giant crayfish to walk forward a little bit and then jump down onto the item below. This is a Somber Smithing Stone 7 and it's the last Somber Smithing Stone we need. We can now take our Death's Poker to +9, which is 1 level from max. To get out of here, just pull your map up and fast travel before anything aggroes you. Go back to the blacksmith in the round table hold. You're going to sell all of your golden runes to cash out as many runes as you can to level up your weapon. And you're going to level the Death's Poker all the way to +9. Most importantly, this is going to increase the damage of the Ghostflame Ignition skill by an incredible amount. We can now use that skill to go one-shot bosses and level up extremely quick. The first thing I'm going to do is show you this incredible leveling technique that I came up with for this build. Go ahead and equip your Gold Pickle Foulfoot, which remember lasts for 3 minutes and gives you 30% more runes. And then move your torch to a slot on the same hand as your Death's Poker. And remember, your Death's Poker does magic damage, but it does a ton of Frostbite buildup. And we can use the torch to reset that Frostbite buildup. So starting at the Fort Ferret side of Grace, you're going to use your Gold Pickle Foulfoot and drink your flask. And I know a lot of you have seen the Dragon Dupe glitch, but you haven't seen it done like this. So we're going to do a Ghostflame Ignition with an L2 followed by an R1. This immediately procs a 10,000 damage Frostbite that we can reset with the fire damage from the torch. And then we can just keep repeating this process over and over extremely quickly. So you could get 3 Frostbites off with over 34,000 damage before you run out of FP and need to use your Flask of Cerulean Tears. So then you get 3 more rotations off for 3 more Frostbites and 34,000 more damage before you need to use your Flask of Cerulean Tears again. Then after your second flask, you're going to do 1 normal rotation. And then on the second rotation, you only need to hit L2, you don't need to follow up with an R1 to finish the last Frostbite needed. So after hitting L2, you need to immediately get on your horse and start heading back to the site of Grace so that you can get there before the dragon dies. As you saw there on rotation 8, I only did an L2 and then immediately got on the horse. I did not follow up with the R1. So then you need to get back to the site of Grace immediately because if the dragon dies before you do, it'll be gone forever. But as you can see, if you're fast enough, the dragon will still be there and you get the 65,000 runes, which is 50,000 flat runes plus the 30% bonus from the Gold Pickle Foulfoot. Now since the Gold Pickle Foulfoot lasts for 3 minutes, if you're quick, you can easily get a second run in as I show here and still have the Gold Pickle Foulfoot active. I did 8 runs in under 10 minutes, averaging about 1 minute and 5 seconds per run. So I was averaging about 60,000 runes per minute. This means you can go all the way to level 60 in under 10 minutes. I'd recommend going to at least about 25 vigor. You can throw a couple into mind if you want to. I would aim for a minimum of 40 intelligence since that's our main damage stat. And I actually pushed faith to 12 here because I was testing a sorcery for the endgame version of this build. You could also farm a lot less or farm a lot more if you wanted to be even stronger. It's really up to you here. This is more or less a loose guide on which stats to prioritize. Which again, vigor, a little bit of mind, and mostly intelligence is where I'd be. So now from the South Raya Lucaria gate, we're going to jump back down and wrap around under the academy. And you're going to need 2 stone sword keys in order to get into the academy crystal cave. And this is an optional but recommended boss fight. If you're new to the game and this is just giving you too much trouble, don't worry about this, it's not mandatory. Now because I was testing that spell that required those couple extra points of faith, I forgot to put 1 more point into strength. You need 16 strength to 2-hand the commander standard for the rallying standard buff. Also be sure to have rock sling equipped when you head into this boss fight. Now before heading into this boss fight, you're going to use your flask and rallying standard. Then you're going to drink a mana flask and unequip the commander standard so you can still medium roll. Then you're going to keep your distance and you're going to cast 3 rock slings in a row. If you get too close, one of the 3 projectiles is going to miss, so they won't all 3 connect, and you will not break their stance in 3 casts. But if you do it right and all of them connect, after 3 casts, they'll be stance broken, and you want to immediately run up and hit a critical, and then you're going to follow that up with a charged R2 attack. If you do it correct, you'll have the first one dead before the second one even realizes what's going on. Then you want to roll away and create that distance again and drink a Flask of Cerulean Tears. And then you're going to just repeat the same process again, keeping your distance, cast 3 rock slings, and then follow up with a critical and a charged R2. If you're new to the game, the stance breaking part is actually very important with this boss, because these bosses take 90% less damage from everything until their stance is broken. At which point, as you can see, you'll do regular damage, and with a +9 Death's Poker, that damage is extraordinary. Now, we don't really care so much about the crystal release spell reward. What we're after is actually up top, so we're going to go and take the elevator up and open the chest at the top. And inside that chest is a spell called Terra Magica. And this spell places a blue glyph on the ground below your feet, and while you're standing within it, you will do 35% more magic damage. And though it looks like fire, Ghostflame Ignition is actually magic damage. Another strategy to try if you're struggling with the first one is to use your wolves to distract and then constantly cast Night Maiden's Mist. As you can see, this spell bypasses their resistance and absolutely melts them. Now we're going to fast travel back to the Grand Lift Adectus waypoint, and we're going to ride due south to the Mausoleum compound, but feel free to take out this annoying Frenzy Flame tower on your way. And for the Erdtree avatar here, we're going to use the same buff routine as last time with our flask and our rallying standard, but this time we're also going to add Terra Magica to the end of the buff routine. And this boss actually has some magic resistance, but it's still not going to be enough to stop it from getting one shot. So our damage is looking really good, but it's actually about to go up significantly again because this boss drops the Magic Shrouding Crack tier. So we can actually throw this in our flask with our Intelligence Knot tier, and this will increase all of our magic damage by another 20% multiplicatively. So that means we're ready for our first official boss fight. We're going to use the exact same buff routine for Margit. We're going to use our flask, followed up by the Rallying Standard. Then we're going to use a Mana Flask and unequip the Commander Standard so that we can still medium roll. Then we're going to start the fight, we're going to skip the cutscene, and we're going to put Terra Magica on the ground at our feet. And for Margit, we want to bait his jumping attack because he has a slow recovery, and then we're going to send it. Okay, so the first thing we did was we went and got a Memory Stone and a couple Stone Sword keys at the Round Table Hold. Then I grab a dagger later on just in case for some reason I wanted to try tumble buffing. Then we're going to head down to the Weeping Peninsula and get the Faith Knot Crystal tier. And from here I'm going to go to Northeast Liurnia and I'm going to get the Howl of Shabriri. Really at this point I'm just trying to stack up buffs early on so that I can get through Godric. Since I need a seal in order to cast Howl of Shabriri, I grabbed the Golden Order seal. It scales with intelligence, although that doesn't really matter. Then I went back to Fort Ferrith and I farmed the dragon a couple more times and leveled up. Now obviously you can level up as much as you want here. My goal is just to get to 60 intelligence to hit the soft cap and 23 faith, so that with the Faith Knot Crystal tier we had 33 to use Howl of Shabriri. You could definitely spend a couple more minutes and level up Vigor if you want to. Now I head over to the Altus Plateau and I can easily one-shot Demi-Human Queen Gillica with just the Commander Standard, Howl of Shabriri, and my Flask. And the only reason we're actually here right now is because this boss is gatekeeping the Ritual Sword Talisman. And we're going to use this to gain 10% more damage while we're at full health, which for most boss fights that should be the case. And speaking of boss fights, we're going to jump straight into one. So we're going to go fight Royal Knight Loretta, but I'm going to show you a way to cheese this boss that you probably haven't seen before. So this is actually really easy to pull off. All you need to do is start the fight, and then you need to run up to this corner that I'm running to. And then when you get there, you're just going to quit out and then load back in. And it'll be super obvious that you did it because when you turn around, Loretta will be spawned in, but her AI will be broken. And I wanted to show it this way because we need to get past her, but I know a lot of people are going to have an issue with her jumping around. Also, just for reference, if you wanted to replicate the buffs but it's a little too fast for you, just remember that YouTube allows you to lower the playback speed all the way down to 25%. Just use the little gear icon on the bottom of the video. So now at this point, we have access to Ronnie, so you're going to want to choose to serve Ronnie the Witch. Then we're going over to Celivis's tower and we're going to accept his task, but we don't actually have to give Nefeli the potion. We're going to progress her questline though because we definitely want the Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone. And then while you're here, don't forget to grab the right half of the Haligtree Secret Medallion. Then head back to the Round Table where you should have no problem dispatching Ensha of the Royal Remains. And this gives us early access to a very good and what I consider a very fitting armor set for a death build. I mean, just looking at it, you see it too, right? So next you're going to want to head over to the Nomadic Merchant over on the coast by the First Steps. And we're going to buy the Armorer's Cookbook 2, which gives you access to crafting neutralizing boluses. And then because I'm lazy, I also just buy the 5 neutralizing boluses he sells as well. And don't forget to go back and kill that Omen Killer to progress Nefeli's questline. So now it's time to take on Godric, and you're just going to use the very simple 3-step buff routine that we've been using. Don't forget to take off the Commander Standard when you enter the fight so that you can medium roll. And if you're curious how we got Terra Magica, remember that we grabbed a lot of this stuff in the OP Early Guide, so go watch that before doing this. You should have no problem one-shotting Godric at this point. As you can see, we actually overkilled him by quite a bit with almost 10,000 damage. Now, I was just trying to get through and make this guide as fast as possible, but you should go and activate Godric's Great Rune at this point. Then in order to progress Celivis's questline, we're going to hand the potion over to Gideon to dispose of. I prefer this option because it gives us the opportunity to progress both Celivis and Nefeli's questlines. Now to progress Celivis's questline, we need 2 Starlight Shards. I grabbed the one on the southern tip of Limgrave and the one by the Church of the Plague, but any 2 Starlight Shards that you grab are fine. You're also going to grab the Amber Starlight, and this is just in that little alcove by the Altus Highway Junction. Then you need to go to Selvus' hidden cellar and find his puppets. Then return to him and accept the Jarrite puppet. It's the more expensive of the two, so you want that one first. Then you're going to tell him that you want another puppet, and this is where you're going to use your Starlight Shards to purchase the Finger Maiden puppet. As you can see now that you couldn't see earlier, this one's only 2 Starlight Shards, the other one would have costed 3. Then just progress his dialogue and give him the Amber Starlight, and then after all of this, you finally get the Magic Scorpion Charm. This is an awesome, basically 12% damage boost to all aspects of our build. Now at this point I went back to the Church of Ella and I bought the 3 crackpots ahead of time so I'd have some throwables later. And then I purchased the crafting kit so that I could start crafting things. Now this part's completely optional and we didn't end up using this item in the run, but if you want to, here's a really cool way to get to Rena's Rise early with a zip. Now if you're on console, there's a way to get over here with Torrent as well, but the jumps are really tricky and I just did not have the patience to line it up for the video. Especially when, like I said, we really don't need access here at this point, so this is completely optional. But if you did choose to do this, you'll now be at the Ainsel River main. You're just going to progress through until you get to the Lake of Rot. And when you get to the Lake of Rot, just be sure that you grab the Lake of Rot shoreline site of Grace. And now you have access to come back here whenever you want. We're after a specific item, but again, we don't end up using it. Before navigating the Lake of Rot, go and grab Flame Cleanse Me. Now this is going to remove all Scarlet Rot from you instantaneously, and it makes navigating the Lake of Rot very easy. Now in order to utilize this, we're going to need a lot of FP, so we're going to allocate our flask charges so it's half Crimson and half Cerulean Tears. Now this is completely optional as well, but if you want to use Night Comet, you can quickly kill this enemy. They're going to drop the Immunizing Horn Charm +1. And the only place you'd really use this is down here because it'll raise your resistance against Scarlet Rot buildup. So I recommend just grabbing it and then quickly warping back to the Lake of Rot side of Grace and starting over. Now you should have no problem navigating your way around the Lake of Rot. Don't forget to grab this Somber Smithing Stone 8, it's conveniently right along the path that we're taking. And then the reason we came down here is actually for the Mushroom Crown. And this just gives you a 10% damage buff after being poisoned. But by the time that you actually use in this run, you would have been able to one-shot Radon anyways. So at this point, I wanted to spice the run up a little bit by using something other than Death's Poker the whole time. So I came up with this creative way to go and one-shot the Tibia Mariner. Now obviously the reason we're here is because we want Tibia summons. And I have kind of mixed feelings on this spell. On one hand, it does look really cool, and it does respectable damage. I just feel like there's much stronger spells without any downsides to choose from, because this one just really does not perform well against moving enemies. By the time that the 3 skeletons swing, the enemy's already long gone and they completely... So now we're already to a point where you see why I buy Stone Sword keys any chance I see at a vendor. We need a Stone Sword key to unlock the Seethwater Cave. And in here, we're just after the boss, which is the Kindred of Rot duo. They have pretty low HP, so it really shouldn't be much of a challenge. If you use Ghostflame Ignition in that simple 3-step buff routine, you should be able to one-shot them for like 200% their health. And they're going to drop the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation Talisman. And this talisman raises all of your attack power by 20% for 20 seconds after any poisoning or rot occurs in the vicinity of your player. Now that includes poisoning yourself with a fetid pot, which you can do very quickly and conveniently outside of boss fog gates. Now at this point we're going to progress White Mask Var's questline, so go meet him at the church in Liurnia and tell him that the 2 fingers didn't seem right. They'll reward you with the Festering Bloody Finger, and you can use these in the Red Blood Ruins to invade Magnus the Beastclaw. Now this NPC is super aggressive, so buffing's kind of a pain. As you can see, it's definitely possible though, just do it as you're running away. And the one-shot's pretty easy actually because they hit very low poise, so Ghostflame Ignition staggers them. But if you're struggling here, don't worry, if you die to them 3 times, you automatically progress the quest anyways. Conveniently, you also get a Somber Smithing Stone 6 here, which we're going to need to upgrade our staff. When you get back to the church, just go ahead and choose Anoint Me, and you'll be given the Lord of Blood's favor, which is the final task to complete this quest line. Now the easiest way to do this is to go to the Church of Inhibition and dye the cloth with the Maiden's Blood there. Just be prepared to hug the cliff all the way around to the backside of the church, or be prepared to fight Fingerprint Vikir. Now when you get back to turn this in, you're going to be rewarded with the Pure Blood Knight's Medal. And this is a big deal because now very early in the game we have access to get to Mohgwyn's Palace. So go ahead and use this, and it's going to transport you to the middle of Mohgwyn Palace. It's very important that before you do anything here that you run up and grab the map and site of Grace just ahead of you. This way, if you die here, you just respawn at this site of Grace, you're still in Mohgwyn Palace, and you also have a place to fast travel back to. So go ahead and make your way forward towards Mohg's arena, and grab the Somber Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone out of the chest just before the arena. This will let you upgrade your Death's Poker to +10. If you go back to Caelid on the north side of that bridge in Dragon Barrow, there's going to be another Scarab with the Somber Smithing Stone 9. Just be careful for this sneaky little Vulgar Militiaman that I didn't see. And we're picking up other Somber Smithing Stones 1 through 9 so that we can start to upgrade our staff as well. At this point I went to the blacksmith and I used that somber ancient dragon smithing stone to upgrade my death's poker to +10. And then I stopped in the graveyard just south of Summonwater Village in Limgrave to grab the Fever's Cookbook 1 so that I could craft sleep pots. Go ahead and grab some mushroom and Trina's lilies and craft at least 1 or 2 of these for the upcoming fight. And then start making your way through the academy. I just went ahead and grabbed that somber smithing stone 3 by the entrance. Ride the elevator all the way down to the bottom of the academy and let the abductor virgin eat you. If you have any sort of substantial amount of runes, I recommend either spending them first to level or use a sacrificial twig or something. This teleports us to Volcano Manor where we can go ahead and start grabbing some more somber smithing stones. Grab the somber smithing stone 6 on the rooftop as soon as you jump down. And then grab the somber smithing stone 5 after taking the elevator up. After unlocking the bridge, we're just going to head straight into the Godskin Noble boss fight. Again, all you need here is your flask, your 2 buffs, and a sleep pot. You could definitely do this without the sleep pot, but this just makes it really easy. It buys us time to go ahead and use Terra Magica and easily one-shot him. Now we just need to get past him, and there's actually a skip for this fight, but it's just much easier at this point to come in and one-shot him than skipping him. Just progress your way through towards Reichard, and then you're going to use a Stone Sword key to go in and grab Royal Knight's Resolve. We want Royal Knight's Resolve in case we come across something later on with super high resistance where we want a tumble buff, because the tumble buff would send our death's poker damage through the roof. After opening the shortcut and grabbing the main Volcano Manor site of Grace, come back and grab the Somber Smithing Stone 7, but be careful because there's a Virgin Abductor guarding it. At this point I went to the Smoldering Church, which is on the border of Limgrave and Caelid, and I grabbed the Missionary's Cookbook 3. This lets you craft silver pickled fowl feet. From here I went to Jarburg, which is just that little place you can jump down on the very east side of Liurnia by the tower. And there's a ton of renewable farmable crafting materials here, as well as several cracked pots. So just out of convenience while I was in Liurnia, I went to the converted tower and grabbed the memory stone there. Then I went to the Fourth Church of Marika on the south side of Weeping so that I could farm some 4-toed fowl feet to craft silver pickle fowl feet. I grabbed some silver fireflies over at the Ainsel River main. And if you didn't come here yet, you can always farm these in caves in Limgrave, Weeping Peninsula, and Liurnia of the Lakes. Then go ahead and craft silver pickle fowl feet. Odds are you're going to need a couple of them. But keep in mind, if you're not trying to one-shot every boss, this is completely optional as well. Basically what we're doing is we're farming a black dumpling helm, and this route is the most efficient way to do it, but even with the silver pickle fowl feet, the drop rate's pretty low. And it always sucks to rely on RNG when farming stuff, but just be patient. I got mine after just a couple minutes. Basically, this item's going to go at the very beginning of our buff routine right after our flask. So if we wear this and we proc Madness, it's going to raise all of our damage by 10% for 60 seconds. I wanted to add another spell at this point, so I went to Liurnia just east of the academy, used our little 3 buff setup plus Terra Magica, and one-shot the Deathrite Bird. And this will give you access to Ancient Death Rancor, which is pretty cool because it's like a heat-seeking spell. It'll track enemies that move around a lot and it'll hit them multiple times. It's a very cool looking spell and it's a very convenient spell. The damage is pretty decent, it's chargeable, so it'll one-shot a lot of bosses, but it won't one-shot the really big endgame bosses. At this point I want to start using some spells so that I could get some variety in the intro for this video for you guys. And to do some respectable damage with that, I had to go and get Lusat's Glintstone Staff. So in order to do this, I went and one-shot the Nox Duo in order to get access to that Lusat's Glintstone Staff that's in the chest right behind them. And smaller, faster enemies like this that move around a lot is where Ancient Death Rancor shines because it'll track them. Also, as you saw, a neat trick when you're using ranged spells in these boss fights is to throw down your Terra Magica right before going through the fog door. Now because we went and got all the difficult somber smithing stones, now that we have the Lusat's Glintstone Staff, we can basically go and upgrade it almost to max right away. The only smithing stones you should be missing is a 1, 2, and a 4, which you can actually buy at EG. And if you didn't pick up that somber smithing stone 3 at the academy, you can buy that with him as well. So go ahead and make your way over to EG, you should have his Site of Grace from earlier in the game, and just purchase whatever somber smithing stone 1 through 4 you need. You should have 5 through 9 already. Then go ahead and upgrade your Lusat's Glintstone Staff all the way up to +9. If you need runes, remember that we have access to the bird farm at Mohg Palace, so just utilize that whenever you need runes. At this point I grabbed some more extravagant buffs just in case I needed them, because remember I was doing this one-shot playthrough completely blind. So while I was here in Liurnia, I went and one-shot the Deathbird down south by the Lyscar Ruins. And I always do this early in my one-shot challenge runs because he drops a red feathered branch sword. And this is a talisman that'll raise your damage by 20% when your health is below 20%. So you'll sub that out for the ritual sword talisman whenever you hit a wall on your damage where you need a little bit more. And while we're planning ahead, we're also going to go and one-shot the Bloodhound Knight in the Lakeside Crystal Cave. And you can do this really easily with Ancient Death Rancor, which is really convenient for agile bosses. And really the main reason that we're here is we want access to Latenna's questline. So just make your way back to her behind the boss fight and hear her request. And really we're just progressing her questline now so we don't forget, so we don't miss out on that somber ancient dragon smithing stone later. Also, while we're in preparation mode, we're going to go and we're going to one-shot Esgar. Now this boss is very fast and he can be tricky, but if you use Ghostflame Ignition and you use the R2 explosion variation, it should kill him before he does anything. And it should also be noted that when he dies, the dogs will also die instantaneously. He gives us the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, which we're going to stash for later. It's a buff that gives us 20% more damage for 20 seconds when blood loss occurs near us. From here I decided I would just go and grab another really easy memory stone by one-shotting the Red Wolf of Radagon. He has pretty low HP, so it's not really tricky, just try to bait out his big jumping attack. And although this opens up Renala, I actually opted against going and killing her at this point, because she has incredibly high magic resistance, which would mean that we would have a really hard time one-shotting her with this build, and there's much easier great runes to get. Now though I didn't fight Renala, I did go that direction to show off the Tibia summons against Moongrim, because I was taking any opportunity I could to build the highlight reel. Now that our damage is high enough, there's really no reason not to progress and one-shot Golden Shade Godfrey, especially since he's gatekeeping our third talisman slot, which would boost our damage quite significantly. And the trick to making this fight easy is to buff near the door and then aggro the fight and bait him back towards your Terra Magica, then just dodge his axe throw and immediately turn around and cast Ghostflame Ignition. And if you follow those steps, it's a pretty easy one shot, and now we have access to your third talisman pouch. So depending on what talisman we put in that slot, it gives us anywhere from 10 to 20% more damage. At this point we need to make our way to patches, and don't forget, anytime you get invaded by a really agile NPC that gives you a hard time, you can just throw on a couple buffs, throw down Terra Magica, and make very short work of them with Ancient Death Rancor. Now if you accidentally kill Patches, don't stress, you can always take his bell bearing to the round table hold and buy everything still. But I recommend just hitting him with a couple Night Comets, having him surrender, and then you can gain access to him as a vendor if you just choose Forgive and Forget. Now in order to get the option to purchase from him, you do have to reload the area and run back down here. I would always recommend buying the 3 gold pickle foul feet that he sells for 600 because they're always going to pay dividends. And then obviously buy the Missionary's Cookbook too so that you can craft more gold pickle foul feet anytime you want. This will significantly boost any rune farming that you do. But the main reason that we're here is to buy Margit's Shackle. And because this works on Morgoth, this makes a very difficult fight with a very fast and high HP boss into a trivial one, because you can just use this to hold Morgoth in place. So I'm actually going to show this full buff routine in real time so that you guys can see that you don't need the Mushroom Crown. You actually do so much overkill damage here too that you don't even need the Black Dumpling. So if you didn't feel like farming the Black Dumpling, you do not need that for this. You'll see that I do the typical buff routine where I use the Flask and then I proc Madness with the Black Dumpling. Then I just use my standard as normal, and while I do switch to the Mushroom Crown before poisoning myself, you'll see that that doesn't matter because it actually cancels itself out because I forgot to heal up for my Ritual Sword Talisman. And since they're both 10%, if I would have just healed up here and not had the Mushroom Crown, I would have had the exact same 10% from the Ritual Sword Talisman. So after using Margit's Shackle, you can use Terra Magica and then use the R2 variation of Ghostflame Ignition. Or you can skip Terra Magica, run up, and immediately do the R1 variation of the Ghostflame Ignition and probably do 15 to 20,000 damage even without the Black Dumpling. Don't forget to grab the Robe Medallion before leaving the area for access to the mountaintops of the Giants. And since Morgoth gave us our second Great Rune, we can go back to the round table and buy our 4th Talisman pouch, and this will scale our damage even higher. At this point we're going to head to the Grand Lift of Rold and we're going to use that medallion to head up to the mountaintops. The first thing I always do is I come and grab Seppuku from the Frozen Lake. If we throw this on a sword, we can use it to proc a bleed to activate our Lord of Blood's Exaltation and White Mask buffs. While you're here, you might as well grab the Somberstone Miner's Bellbearing 3 in case you wanted it later. And don't forget about the 3 stack of Smithing Stone 7s above the church. At this point I did the Consecrated skip. You can do this on console or PC, it doesn't matter. You basically just use the Spirit Spring to jump off the map and then you jump left when the camera changes like it just did there. Then you're just going to free fall until you get down to the bottom of that mountain and then you're just going to leave the game and load back in. And when you load in, it'll say Mountaintops of the Giants, but you're actually down in the Consecrated Snowfield now. And you'll see that when you take a couple steps forward here. If you need a more detailed description, we have an entire video on just this skip on my wife's channel, and that's YouTube at Emberborne. But basically from here, you're just going to follow my path to navigate your way down these rocks. And when you get to the bottom, you're just going to use the waygate there, and that's going to take you over to the Minor Erd Tree. And from the Minor Erd Tree, you just ride down the hill and grab the Site of Grace at Ordina. And grabbing the Site of Grace is extremely important. I can't stress that enough, so you don't have to redo this skip later. You always have a fast travel point here in the Consecrated Snowfield. So at this point I went back to the round table to buy a rapier as a very lightweight option to put Seppuku on. So now I can use this to proc Lord of Blood's Exaltation if I hit a wall where I need a little more damage. And then to add to that buff, I also went back to Mohg Palace and I one-shot the Nameless White Mask. And again, even if you're one-shotting everything with Des Poker, you probably won't need this. But remember, I need to grab everything I can in case I need it later because I'm going through this run blind and I don't know what kind of damage walls I'm going to run into. So I'm just grabbing every extra buff early on in case I may need it later. Now the white mask works very similar to the Lord of Blood's Exaltation in that whenever blood loss occurs in the vicinity of the player, you'll get a 10% damage buff for 20 seconds. It should also be noted that it stacks with Lord of Blood's Exaltation. Also, now that we have access to Consecrated Snowfield, we should come over here to the Apostate Derelict and finish Lieutenant's questline. This will get us a Somber Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone, which we can use on our Lusat's Glintstone Staff whenever we feel like we need a little bit more damage. Also, if you didn't know, there's a Somber Smithing Stone 9 on a chair just a couple feet away as well. Now with access to Consecrated Snowfield, we also gain access to the Deathrite Bird at the end of the Frozen River. And this is going to be the highest health Deathrite Bird that we're going to fight, but you should still have no problem one-shotting it with the Ghostflame Ignition if you just follow what I did here. And again, remember, if the buff routine's too fast for you, just use YouTube to slow it down to 25%. Now we can start mixing things up a little bit because this Deathrite Bird is going to give us access to Explosive Ghostflame. And Explosive Ghostflame is the highest damage death spell in the game. It does a huge AoE explosion that does very high damage, and then it does lingering tick damage similar to the R1 on Death's Poker, but it does it in every direction. Now honestly, you probably could have easily come and one-shot Radahn any point past like Golden Shade Godfrey or Morgott most likely. And the only reason that I'm coming back to do it now is because I need to progress Alexander's questline, so I have to talk to him after defeating Radahn. So if you one-shot Radahn earlier and you already talked to Alexander here, then don't worry about this part. Then to progress his quest, we need to talk to Alexander in the lava over at Mount Gelmir. And then the last thing you need to do to get Alexander moved to his final location is kill the Fire Giant. Now because Ghostflame Ignition is a damage over time spell and the Fire Giant automatically transitions at a certain point of health, you're not going to be able to straight up one-shot him like you did with Carian Grandeur, which is one big hit, but you can easily one-shot each phase as I showed here. Honestly, if you're having a hard time with him, just stay mounted on Torrent and stick to his left ankle, staying underneath him the whole time, and you should make the fight very easy. His attacks are very easy to dodge while you're underneath him. Because I've just been putting points into intelligence as I had extra runes, I would show that I'm nowhere near maxed out at 80 intelligence yet. And remember that 33 faith is because I get 10 extra faith from the faith not tier. So now it's time to commit a cardinal sin and travel over to Crumbling Fire Missoula. Don't forget to pick up the Somberstone Miner's Bellbearing 4 in case you want it later. And be sure to grab at least one side of Grace here so you can fast travel back. At this point I went back to the academy to the Isolated Merchant and I bought the Fanged Imp Ashes. And we're not using this on a boss, I'm just using this to help get the Graven Mass Talisman. And that's because I just think that this is the easiest way to solve the puzzle for the Albinauric Rise. So then just work your way to the top of the rise and grab the Graven Mass Talisman. And this will boost the damage of all of our sorceries by 8%. And I wanted to use spells as much as possible to spice the run up a little bit. Now since we're trying to boost the damage of our sorceries, another way we can do that is upgrading our Lusat's Glintstone Staff to +10. And then as usual, we can make the Godskin duo fight much simpler by using a sleep pot and then doing all of our buffs. And you should have around 60 seconds to pull off all these buffs, so you shouldn't have any issue before they wake up. And then this is the first opportunity I had to really showcase off how much damage Explosive Ghostflame can do. So this sort of gives a good visual illustration as to why I say Explosive Ghostflame is the strongest death spell in the game. Because if they had more health, they would have taken even more damage from all the ticks. But on all these fights, remember you can also use Ghostflame Ignition to achieve similar results. Well, actually most of the time better results. So now in order to finish Alexander's questline, we're going to need a Stone Sword key and we're going to take the elevator up to him. Go ahead and finish through his dialogue to the point where he tells you to return when you're ready to fight him. If you do it this way, he won't be hostile, so it'll give you an opportunity to put all your buffs on before fighting him. Then you just need to walk back up to him, talk to him again, let him know you're ready, and the fight will then start, but you should be able to one-shot him before he pulls off any sort of attack. You can literally use anything you want here, you're going to one-shot him very easily. I just seized the opportunity to get another Tibia Summons clip because it looks really cool. What we're after here is the Shard of Alexander talisman that he gives to you. And this talisman raises the damage of all skills by 15%. So this is another boost to the already preposterous damage of Ghostflame Ignition on our Death's Poker. A lot of people don't realize that this non-boss Tree Sentinel variant will just stay up there and watch you buff and let you do it. So just use whatever buffs you want and then run up on him and one-shot him. It should be pretty easy with the Ghostflame Ignition. And the only reason I'm actually showing this fight is for those of you that generally have trouble with this guy. Obviously he's not a boss, so I wouldn't really stress if you're not one-shotting him. You could always use ranged spells or whatever you want to get past this. Now, due to the nature of the fight with Malekith and how fast he is in both phases, for your sanity, I highly recommend you just use a ranged spell and maybe a spirit summon. But if you can pull off buffing and casting an explosive Ghostflame on this ring in the middle of the floor, you can one-shot Beast Clergyman and Malekith with a single explosive Ghostflame. And the reason that it works this way is because Malekith is directly beneath where the Beast Clergyman starts in the fight. So if you use a spell or skill with a large enough AoE, and it's enough to one-shot the Beast Clergyman, then it should be enough to one-shot Malekith in his hitbox right below the surface as well. Now when you get to the Ashen Capital, don't forget to grab that Somber Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone by the Gargoyle. And at this point, you should be able to go back to the round table and purchase all of Malekith's armor, which is what I recommend for this build. Obviously, you could min-max each piece, but this gives you pretty good weight to poise and weight to defense ratios, and it just looks so much better than if you were to completely min-max and piece together from 4 different sets of armor. And that's not even considering how well it flows with the death theme of this build. Gideon is another very easy boss fight. You have the opportunity to use whatever buffs you want before even engaging in dialogue with him. And then even at that point, he doesn't immediately aggro, he'll sit there and go through quite a bit of dialogue, allowing you to do whatever attack you want. So use whatever you want here. I obviously had to take advantage of another situation that let me use the Tibia summons. Honestly here, if you're using Death's Poker, I doubt you even need more than 1 or 2 buffs. Now for Godfrey, I actually let him kill me the first time so that I could get the fight to this point where I would have a longer time to buff, waiting for him to walk all the way across the arena. And then from there, I just replicated what I did with the Golden Shade Godfrey fight. I baited out the axe throw attack and I followed up with the Ghostflame Ignition from the Death's Poker. Now similar to Malekith, he's going to transition to his Hoarah phase after a certain amount of damage, so you're going to need your Flask of Cerulean Tears before you can one-shot Hoarah as well. Ultimately, as crazy as it seems, this fight actually isn't that difficult. You just do most of your buffs before going through the Fog Gate, do your Bleed and Poison after going through, cast Terra Magica, and then treat it like the Golden Shade Godfrey. Now at this point, the tutorial part of the walkthrough is over, you're at the Elden Beast, you can easily go in there and finish this game off. But I want to show you how to get another cool talisman and one-shot Mohg. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Ordina, we're going to do the puzzle there, then we're going to take the portal over to Mikla's Haligtree, and we're going to work our way to Loretta. And with Loretta, you can actually buff by the door and then trigger the fight, run up and one-shot her with Ghostflame Ignition. This fight may take you a couple of tries if her RNG doesn't line up and she tries to jump out of your Ghostflame Ignition. Now immediately past Loretta, don't forget about the Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone in case you want that for another weapon later. And then there's a Somber Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone on the bridge with the Avatar. And then the real reason we came all the way here was to come to this building above Malenia so we could pick up the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. Now this talisman increases your resistance to physical damage by 20%, so this is effectively the same as having 25% more health while you're out exploring between boss fights. Now I'm also going to say that Malenia can be one-shot in both phases. I'm not going to show the second phase because I'm challenging you to figure it out, and if you do, I will showcase it on the channel. So you need to make your way back now underneath the capital to the underground roadside, and grab Mohg Shackle, which works exactly the same as Margit Shackle earlier. With this shackle, it's not only possible, but very easy to one-shot Mohg. And this boss is a very good place to showcase the true potential of the damage of the Death's Poker. Now, if you're still here, that means you're enjoying the video. If you haven't smashed that like button, you should do so now. And if you're looking for a written checklist version guide of this build, all of that stuff is over on our Patreon. So whether you're just looking to support the channel a little bit, or you're looking for access to those custom guides, the link to our Patreon will be in a clickable element at the end of this video or in the description or pinned comment below. Also be sure to let us know in the comment section below what build you want to see as a one-shot build next, or any other Elden Ring or Dark Souls content that you'd like to see.